All right, welcome everyone. Another dprofiles call. Today we have some exciting stuff. The one really cool thing is a demo of an integration between SourceCred and IDX. So excited about that. Actually, I can share my screen so we can all see the agenda. Then an update on also known as definition, an update on some bounties, a question from Adam Stallard. Anyone else have any topics they would want to add to the agenda before we kick off?
Yeah, Joel, do you want to talk about any of, or Paul, do you want to talk a bit about some of the new CIPs, particularly for like IDX lists and things, which is great for like social graphs?
That's a good call out. Paul, do you want to talk about the append list?
Yeah, sure. I can give an intro to it.
Cool. Is there anything else there that's yeah, I guess it's kind of it's kind of tangential. All right, so anything else someone want to bring up? Let's see. Cool. Well, if not, then let's get started. So, Will, do you want to kick us off with the stuff you've been working on?
Yeah, this is from East Denver. I'll share my screen and show it's not real complicated, but I'll show what it looks like. So I assume y'all can see this. This is a really straightforward interface for creating those about known as entries, or if I can spell. So you create this creates a token in the Redis backend, and then you have to, within 5 minutes of it checking, there has to be a gist which has been edited within the last 5 minutes. So I can also do this by editing and updating an old one. And then I check for the gist. It goes and reads from my most recent GitHub entries and should come back with a verification. Real quick. Should. It has been where I tested this about 2 days ago and it was working then, so it should still be running.
It looks like something updated in your console, yeah.
Yeah. And you can see that every time you run it, it creates a new entry. And so these are all of the existing old ones. So it should have gotten, so it got the existing ones, it added a new one to it, and it must be writing it out to Ceramic now. Yeah, and then it finally writes it out and says what the commit ID is. And then there's just a simple little program that runs and pulls down all for each. Whoops. For each Ethereum address in SourceCred, it looks up and sees if there is a Ceramic entry, an IDX entry for that Ethereum address. And if there is, then it creates aliases in SourceCred. And as you can see, there's mine and if an alias already exists with the same name, it throws an error. So that's why you see that for 18 entries here, it says that there's a duplicate. But that's pretty straightforward. It's not a complex piece of software, but it does do what it's supposed to do correctly, pretty much. And you can see that pretty much no one has registered an IDX. Has migrated their profiles over to IDX. Yeah. So it doesn't really pick up much.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think this use case is really cool. I don't know if everyone might not be familiar with SourceCred, but
I
it's
can just go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, so what SourceCred does is it takes all of the comments and emojis in Discord. It takes all the posts and replies in Discourse, and it also looks through GitHub and all the commits and all the everything. It converts those into a big graph of attributions, and then changes those into a Markov chain that it somehow evenly distributes an XP token, or at least it's a cred token for SourceCred, or it's XP for a metagame, but it distributes a token throughout that graph so that everything gets a fair weight. And then based on that, every so often there's a more valuable token that's minted and distributed based on those distributions.
Yeah, so I think like that idea of like SourceCred, just looking at like how people interact and like contribute to a project, and then distributing tokens based on that is super cool. And kind of what you did here with actually like, because I think right now with SourceCred, you have to like manually edit the file to like, this is my account on, you know, this course, this is my Discord, this is my account on GitHub, and then someone needs to merge that. And so like, it's a very manual process. But with IDX, like you could verify in this application, or if there's another application that verifies your like GitHub or this course or what have you, then like you could just add all of those to your IDX profile and then tie that to your Ethereum address. And then you can, I assume you would just like go to some interface or say like, I don't know, like register your address there, and then you would like automatically become part of that SourceCred community.
Yeah, I think that's how it works.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is super cool, and it seems like that this will enable kind of this piece to kind of you can still use this if SourceCred like integrates I don't know, some other chat app or some other forum app. Like you could still use the same structure in IDX to like put new accounts into that, and like maybe you have a community that is like a really active on, I don't know, Facebook or whatever. Like you would be able to like tie all of that data back to your profile and then like distribute XP based on that.
4chan and Reddit.
Yeah, I don't think 4chan would work because there you have like unique anonymous users actually, I think. But anyway, yeah, so thanks for showing us this. And I think so the program that you have actually that like makes all these associations and puts them into SourceCred, like is that available somewhere that people could look at?
Yeah, I'll post a link in the chat.
Cool. All right, and any questions for Will about this whole integration?
Yeah. So Will, what's the plan and generally the approach to, you know, trying to get this into SourceCred like natively, or what's the go forward strategy?
That is, I mean, we're still holding up because there's several aspects. Having the somebody hosting the verification page, like currently this is running off of just some instance that I spun up, but this is also was made before the as known as was completely, that specification was completely fleshed out. So it's mostly just holding off for a few of the pieces on the IDX side to be finished up. And then this will be a regular process of when SourceCred updates, and it updates daily, or so every so often. It's set to run through GitHub. When it updates, it'll just check for new aliases, is my understanding.
I can speak very briefly to the SourceCred perspective, if that's helpful.
Absolutely.
I'm EJ. I'm one of the contributors on SourceCred. So the self-service identity management is definitely a pain point, as Will observed. There's a lot of manual effort that has to go into it right now. And for some of our instances like metagame that are dealing with a lot of users, that's a huge pain point. So this is something that we are prioritizing as we're sort of in like a beta kind of phase right now. So this is something that we are actively really excited to integrate into the core product, and it would be available. This would potentially, IDX will potentially be our primary means of authenticating users. But yeah, we're waiting for a couple of developments on the IDX side to support our full use case.
Awesome. Yeah, we will hopefully have like a deployed version of the identity link service. I don't know, Joel, pretty soon. And I guess those last updates would just need to be made to the code to use the also known as definition, as Will said. But you know, that should all be done fairly quickly. And I think the general plan is to have IDX deployable on like a pre-release mainnet within the next month and a half or so. So then all this data will actually be like mainnet data. So then it will be usable.
Okay, cool. That time frame is really helpful for me as the sort of project manager who's trying to coordinate some stuff on the SourceCred side. Thanks.
Yep.
Sweet. Well, this ties us kind of quite neatly into the next agenda item, so which I'll go ahead and share, which is the also known as definition got merged into the CIP repo. So let's see if I find the correct thing to share here. Also, if anyone has like free attention, feel free to like take notes during the call. I'm gonna try to do it, but I haven't been able to so far. All right, so let me see that I got to the correct thing. Oh, yeah, so the also known as definition has been merged. And yeah, we did some small modifications to this definition. So let's just go into the index here of the CIPs. Let's find also known as. The main thing that actually Will found out and that we hadn't thought about was that the root structure of this schema, where you put the different accounts into like this document in IDX, was an array. And there were some incompatibilities with how basically different standards for like JSON manipulation work. So like you can have a root array in JSON schema, but we use a system called JSON patch to like update documents, and JSON patch didn't really support arrays at the top level, which proved to be kind of problematic. So instead we used like wrapped the array in like an object that has an accounts property. And that's basically it. It's the same kind of AKA definition as before. So what this looks like is essentially a user adds like a content, and that is like an array of accounts. So here is like a verification of a Twitter account. Here's a verification of a GitHub account. So this contains like the username, and it contains the claim itself. So this would be like a link to the gist that includes the DID. And then there's an attestation. So this is like a third-party service that had checked that this claim is correct and issues like basically a signature. This is a check mark saying like, hey, I checked this out. This checks out. So and that's useful because like if you're used an app consuming this, you might not wanna, or you might not be able to like go to Twitter because you might not have a Twitter API key to check this claim out. So you can just check that, okay, someone verified it, then I'm gonna trust that verification. And potentially like a user could have multiple attestations made by multiple different parties if that's desirable. Yeah, so that's it. This has been merged into the CIP. I think also we actually ended up merging this into, or I'm actually, no, this is not the right thing. Is this the right place? I'm not sure, Paul. But yeah, it's merged into the IDX library. So right now you can just do like IDX dot set and then also known as. So that will just kind of work. Yeah, which we knew were a pain point before when Will kind of figured it out and how to do it anyway. Yeah, the other thing I want to highlight, so the thing that was missing for like this full kind of source cred compatibility was discourse. Like we have a verification service that does verifications for GitHub, Twitter, and Discord. But yeah, we didn't have discourse. So there was an issue where we discussed it. We put up a bounty for it. And actually, before I even approved the bounty, or someone to work on the bounty, someone had like implemented the bounty and made a PR, which is super cool. So we actually have a pending PR here that adds discourse functionality. So quite excited about this. You just need kind of like a final review before it's merged. Yeah, any questions on like the AKA CIP or this new Discord verification? Or maybe like requests for other verifications, like accounts.
Telegram might be nice.
Yeah.
I imagine that would work similarly to the Discord bot.
Yeah, that seems likely. Telegram would be cool. All right, so maybe let's see how much time we have. A bunch of time. So, is it okay, Adam, if we do the append list?
Yeah.
Kind of walk
Sure.
through. Cool.
Sounds good.
Thanks. All right. So, Paul, do you want to go ahead?
Yep. Let me share my screen. Okay, that's this one. All right, so this is a CIP about defining an append collection schema. So the goal is to support a use case of possibly very large collection of items that would be stored with Ceramic and IDX split over multiple documents rather than a single one, so that we don't end up with a document with lots of items in a single array, for example, but rather with multiple documents having a certain limited number of items in each document. And then once one of these document, so here called the collection slice, is filled, we create a new collection slice in order to add new items. So the spec essentially describes what is fundamentally a linked list with an entry point append collection document and the schema for it, and as well as the individual slice schema so that it can be linked between one another. So we're currently still working on refining this spec. So a lot of things that are displayed here are not the current thing, because we are thinking about taking more advantage of the determinism functionality of Ceramic in order to be able to access a slice directly based on its number, rather than having to require the pointers between the different slices. So this is not like really accurate in terms of different relations between the slices, but the general idea is that we would have a top level collection that would define what is the size of an individual slice, and how many slices there is currently associated to this collection. And then inside each individual slice, having the content being an array of items that need to be stored. And here defining the relationship to the previous and next slice. But with what we are changing, it's gonna be done a bit differently actually. So part of it is the goal for this is to define these schemas in a rather generic way so that we could implement some toolings like a JavaScript library on top of it that would handle supporting this use case with a single library basically, and you could point at different schemas. So really about having a collection of items that can be added to and can be efficiently queried from the start of the collection or from the end of the collection and then backwards. So this is where this algorithm are kind of describing it, some of these flows. So how to do a first insertion, other insertion, so around knowing what is the last slice and adding to it, and how loading of items can be done based on going from the start of the collection or the end of the collection, or maybe from a specific item that is known in the collection and then loading the following or previous items from there. And it's also meant to handle removal. So as just replacing one of the item, the target item with an empty value. The idea being that that would make the removal kind of safe, as in it's not going to be completely shifting the position of all the items in the collection, but rather having this empty item ensures that the different IDs for loading or adding wouldn't be changed. Yeah, so we have it part of the CIP's repository. It's CIP 85. So if you want to have a look and give any feedback, it's all there. Please add your comments. Thanks.
Great. Any questions for Paul about all of that?
Paul, just so to clarify, like this is a general ceramic CIP, right? So this type of a system could be used whether you're creating an IDX record, like for a social graph, right? So let's say you just have an array of DIDs that you follow. It's like a follow collection. And basically then now the individual DIDs that you follow would be sharded into these slices. And so that way you could just more efficiently sync data from the network and query, but also like just for ceramic documents generally that like don't need to be associated to IDX. You could, you just have like a list of like maybe an application has a DID and they're just publishing a document that contains the DIDs of their users. So they know like who uses their app. They could use this to build like a sharded user list, right? So you don't have like a single ceramic document with like 50,000 DIDs.
Yes, that's the idea. Now it's mostly meant for something where order kind of matters or is more relevant. So let's say you want to create a blog and you have you want to display the latest post first or this kind of things, rather than having a collection, maybe as you described with users. Like for users, I guess it really depends on whether you want to, whether the order matters or not. Like if it doesn't, maybe you're better off with a hash map or something else that would be more efficient for your use case. But it's more if you want to have a chronological feed or large collection where the order of insertion somehow matters, that could be a good use case.
Cool.
Hey, Paul, this is Izzy. I have a question. If you're removing records and you're replacing them with null, how does the selection of like first X records and last N records work? Would you actually get a null record if I requested the first 5, for example, or would it skip it and grab the next record that actually has content?
Yeah, so it should skip it. So let's say you define your slice as having 50 items in the collection, and from the client you are requesting 60 of them. So you would first load the first slice, and let's say out of the 50, 10 have been removed and set to null. So you would actually only load 40 from the first slice, and then you need to load the second slice to get 20 more items to satisfy the client query of having 60 items, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then like the CI, well, whatever you guys implement, like the library function that does that first will do that automatically, or whoever ends up writing the client would need to do that.
Well, ideally that should be under the library level, but then obviously it's up to the client if they want. I guess as soon as the spec exists, even if there is no library, ideally clients could be built using different languages or anything, using the spec without having the need for library. But eventually, for sure, like once there is a library, that should make things easier for developers.
Clear, thanks.
Welcome.
And Paul, I saw somewhere that you mentioned like activity streams or something. Was this like loosely modeled after that?
Yeah. So there is this spec on activity streams about, well, activity streams collections fundamentally are kind of one of the inspirations for this, which I think is kind of the same. I mean, as part of this logic, right, of having a top level collection and then different pages in this collection.
All right, cool. Thanks, Paul. That seems like a very useful tool that many of us might end up using. Cool. So next up, Adam, you had a question.
Yes, I did have a question. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Let's see. Maybe I can just try sharing my desktop. Okay. I guess I have to click a box to allow this to happen. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. It says that I need to quit and reopen to be able to do this, but I'd like to do this, so I will quit and come back. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's see if I can share now. Yes, okay. So can people see my screen? What? Wait, am I on mute? Okay.
Yeah, we see your screen.
Okay, good. Okay, so these are, we're talking about profiles, decentralized profiles. And these are not, and we've been talking about user profiles. These are not users, these are applications, but these applications have profiles. And one of the things we want to do with this is, right now we have these applications are managing in a centralized way. We basically chose someone to help manage these profiles in a centralized way. These are applications that users can find to use with their Bright IDs. And every application if they want to make a change to something like their logo or their description or their URL, and or they want to add to this registry, they have to go through this centralized process that we've set up and talk to a certain person and send it. And we'd really like these to be self-managed. And so Ceramic is great for that as a decentralized document store to be able to manage something like this. We would, the thing that makes it tricky though is, so you move to being decentralized, but then you realize, okay, if we want to have these stick arounds, then we need to find a way to pin the documents that we create. And so then the question, which I don't know the answer to, is what's the best way to approach pinning in a decentralized manner? Because we could go back to centralized again and say, okay, we're gonna assign this person to run a node to make sure, a Ceramic node to make sure that this gets pinned. But then it becomes centralized again. We could also say, okay, well, we have the application. If you want to submit to this registry, you're responsible for also running a Ceramic node. But that feels like kind of maybe a heavy solution and maybe not the same type of concerns that someone creating one of these applications might not also be knowledgeable or willing to run a Ceramic node. So I'm wondering, how do we, so it seems like you're back to kind of maybe inventing your own decentralized solution on how to make sure that things are pinned, where you say, okay, maybe we can incentivize anyone to help provide this service for us to pin these things. But I just want to know what people are doing, or what the recommended approach is to solve the pinning problem.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think you kind of, this problem is really kind of something that I think everyone is going to have to approach in some way, or are going to face. And I think just thinking like the short kind of pragmatic term, like having one or multiple peers that you kind of assign to pin stuff is probably the way to go, because that kind of, it's kind of a bit centralized, but it's also like the data is not locked into like a central actor. So it's like, if one of your like 3 peers goes down, you can like always add a new one. It's like the data kind of is free within that network. And I think like if you have like a community, maybe like you have community participants that want to like run nodes to keep the data of your application around. So I think those are the type of kind of short-term solutions to this. Looking ahead, like this is one of the core problems we want to solve with Ceramic. So we're looking at like, how can we create an incentivized network that has some crypto economic incentives that you can use, like pay the network to like say, hey, keep this document around, and then the network will kind of just take care of that for you. So that's kind of the goal of Ceramic Network. But right now, you kind of have to have one or multiple nodes that pin the content.
Okay,
And
that's good to know that is a goal that Ceramic has, because I think that would be great. Are there any examples from other networks where that's been done successfully?
I was gonna just say, with one more clarifying thing too, and hopefully this will make it easy to understand like where the parallels are. But so Ceramic really has like 2 types of, it stores 2 things. It stores like the state of the document, and it stores the like the list of CIDs that make up the document, the commits. And so a Ceramic node can sort of persist those CIDs wherever it wants. Like right now, it's locally in the IPFS node. It just pins them for any document it cares about. But it could sort of additionally send them to Filecoin or Arweave or a server as a secondary backup. So like even if that node goes down, it loses everything. Like the CIDs are still persisted on a data persistence network, like that sort of, we don't want to approach that because there's so many people doing it, and like it's easier if a developer or a node operator could pick, like, I want to persist mine on Filecoin, or I want to pay once and persist it on Arweave. But what Ceramic will really care about is like the state for content, and that will be sort of more of what the incentive structure is around. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Thank you for making that distinction.
One last thing to add, Adam, is, so Joel talked about short term, just kind of choose a peer to run it. Long term, there might be crypto economic incentive. Medium term, which hopefully is closer to short, but not immediate, there will be infrastructure providers who, you know, you could pay to run a node for you, so no one in your community has to worry about it. So again, centralized in the same way that, you know, you might be relying on one for persistence, but it's still built with the decentralized architecture, so you could change anytime.
Cool. Well, thanks, Adam. That was a great question. It's like going to the core of Ceramic and what we're trying to do. So that's great. All right. Well, that's our agenda. I think we can open up the floor for any kind of discussion relating to profiles on kind of the D-Web. So yeah.
Hey all, Kevin from Gitcoin here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good.
Cool. So one of the things that I'm interested in doing is taking the Sybil resistance that Gitcoin has aggregated as part of our Gitcoin grants rounds and enabling people to take it around the web to other sites with them. And so I'm actually, like, nights and weekends, when I'm done doing my day job, I'm coding up something that I'm just going to try to YOLO out for grants round 9 called, like, tentatively called Passport, or it's just basically going to take a JSON representation of the data that we aggregate, Bright ID, Twitter, Google, and it's going to give you a Sybil score. And basically, I wanted to create this proof of concept because Sybil resistance in the D-Web is this chicken and the egg problem where no one has it, so no one builds off of it. And no one builds off of it, so no one has it. And I just feel like, you know, we're in this unique spot where we started to aggregate some of this information, and we could probably start to spin that chicken and the egg cycle. I guess I'm really just like trying to YOLO something out in the next week or so. I really want to host this information on 3Box, Ceramic, IDX. I'm not exactly sure, you know, which like, I guess I'm just saying, like, A, I wanted to share that I'm doing this because we could maybe, like, I'd love feedback on it. And then B, just like if I could get a JavaScript snippet or like somewhere in the docs that just like shows me how to upload a doc that initially is just like very bare bones and upload it, then I'm going to try to put that into a front end over the next week or so. So open to feedback, but the main ask is like, where in the docs do I look for this JavaScript snippet?
Cool. Well,
I guess I'll add one more thing. First, do no harm. We're not putting any PII data into the document at all. So it's just going to be an anonymized like Sybil score, and it'll be like no one will be able to trace it back to who it is.
yeah, so I mean, just putting that in the Ceramic document should be fairly straightforward. One thing that would be like pretty cool, and yeah, I can point you to the code in a sec. One thing that would be even cooler is like actually putting that as like, or basically like taking the data that you generate and creating like an IDX definition for that. So the user has like the ability to import that into their IDX later.
Okay.
So basically that would look something like you create this document for each user, and then like if the like the user can later use like import that, like it's like a definition in their IDX is like you know, Gitcoin Sybil score or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, I like don't want to brand it just as Gitcoin because like, you know, it's not about us, it's about the Sybil score. But you know, all of the rest of that sounds good. Okay, so I'll reach out to you, Joel, for a code snippet. Fair warning, we're Python shop, not a JavaScript shop, which is why I found it a little bit hard to integrate with some of the stuff. But if we can just do like a Webpack version of the API, it should be fine. And then the boss mode, and if I can get to it this weekend, what I want to do is I want to build like a little honeypot site where if you have this passport, then we'll just give you like $5 worth of ETH. Because I think it would be like, you need a first use case for this passport for people to actually care about it. And I think that would be like a fun thing to hack together. So yeah, Joel, I'll hit you up for the code, but if anyone else has questions or comments about what I'm doing, totally open to feedback.
Kevin, when do you want this to go live?
Grants round 9 starts in a week. I was planning on just like hacking it together over the next week or so, and then just like kind of having a proof of concept after the dust from the round settles. So maybe in like a week and a half to 2 weeks. YOLO.
YOLO. Curious, but like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's chat about the best way to do that.
Okay. Cool. I'll reach out to you guys on Discord. But if anyone has feedback on that idea, I'm totally like I'd love to hear what people think of that. It's really just to spin the chicken and the egg, like of Sybil resistance. That's like the core discrete problem that I'm kind of laser focused on in between running the business. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Right. Anyone else have any like other things they want to talk about or discuss relating to dprofiles?
This is more like a general question and call to action. So we were just onboarding a new GP to our fund, and he was asking, so yeah, you're very big on SSI and in identity. What are the actual use cases that we can invest in that actually throw out some profit? And so the one thought that I had for a very long time is the equivalent of a do not call list for all of your data. So I assume everybody knows do not call.gov, right? You submit your phone number, and all of the marketers have to subscribe to it to make sure that they don't call a phone number that's listed on there. And if they don't, it's a fine of, I think, $11,000. So I envision that we need something very, very similar like that for all of your data, right? Including stuff like your biometric data, et cetera, that should not be used. So food for thought, and also if you guys have like any thoughts on that specifically, it'd be super interesting to us. Does it make sense, or is it just nonsense?
I mean, I think it makes sense, and the IDX, some sort of like settings definition, definitely seems like it would be the right place to put something like that. The challenge is like in the regulatory enforcement, right? Like there is regulation and enforcement around do not call lists.
Right.
But like,
well, I have some access to that. So I'm advising the Chief Privacy Officer of the US Senate on the latest technology development. So, and I'm also in direct contact with people at Homeland and law enforcement here. So I have some influence and a few politicians, but I'm super interested in see this happening in the real world. It's utterly needed, right? Because as long as we have all these copies out there and people get to use it, but we're not getting anywhere. The other point that occurred to me earlier, so before this call, I talked to our folks at the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and the same topics keep coming up in different groups. Like they're also using this term credentials for something that's actually not credentials. So what I mean by that, so as you guys may or may not know, I'm a board member at Open Travel, where we are responsible for the open source standards within the travel space. It's a 20-year-old organization. Most hospitality out in the world is using it. And we have standards for credentials, but in our world, these standards are very narrowly defined and includes things like passport and the metadata that you get with your passport and that you need to transmit in order for you to actually be able to, let's call it, pass a border plane and so forth. So the larger point here being is, I started now writing this myself, but on this natural language level, and there specifically within the subset of the discipline of, let's call it, law and legal, there are established definitions. So it becomes very problematic if we translate things into code and use the same words that don't match the real world, right? If you call something a certificate, that's not a certificate in the real world. You call something a credential, that's actually not a credential in the real world. Does that make sense? Because that to me is like code is law, and right, I totally subscribe to that. I was a software developer before I became a lawyer, and now I'm neither. But the larger point here being is that is the biggest issue I have on a daily basis when people send me papers. It's like I have to figure out how are they using terms like credential, authentication, verification, certification, because consistently everybody keeps making up their own definition of what that is within the context of the application. But there are actually generally accepted terms within the real world that should be a starting point. So my objective is to create a depository for that everybody can draw from, right? And just say, if I use that word credential, then in the real world, this means X. Like an authentication is something in the real world that means that. Attestation, by the way, is a very narrowly defined legal term for something that you actually do include. But I started discussions with head of legal for Kraken and Shapeshift and a couple of others that I'm trying to get to help me create this particular depository and then share it through GitHub or other means that people can just access and make this their starting point, right? Before they start breaking it down, translating it into code. All right. Sorry for the ramble, but that's a thing that has been on my mind for a very long time, and I hope that someone would address that topic, because again, I run into this on a daily basis. Right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be useful when that's available.
Yeah.
It's like
the one thing maybe that's a little more practical. So I don't know if that was a thing the last time we spoke. So the Ethereum Foundation had reached out to us about this portable KYC standard. Did I mention that or no? I don't remember.
Yeah, you mentioned that last time.
Oh, okay, so I rewrote that problem statement. It's on GitHub. I share that for what it's worth. That will give you just a little bit of insights in like how we think about this, like from a viability perspective, as in like if we as investors look at the space, what are we looking for? Right? The problem statement is always crucial. And so the larger point here, and that's also something I see on a weekly basis, is that people identify a problem that's not the primary problem, i.e. people want to solve for banks. Well, banks are not the problem, right? Banks solve a problem. You just need to solve the problem that they are solving better than the banks do. So it becomes a very different focus. Here, let me share you the problem statement framing. This is simply for quote unquote portable KYC, which again, the problem statement there initially, oh, I sent it directly to Adam because I messaged him directly before and he ignored me. Here you go. So the point here is that they were essentially looking at the legacy regulation, but it's also important to understand the legacy regulation is based on the legacy technology, right? So the dragnet approach of KYC is simply a result of database technologies, right? There is no reason for 99.999% of financial transfers to have your PII attached to that. So you need to come from that perspective as a starting point. And the larger point there is technology will drive the law in that perspective. What I mean by that, once someone has an application out there that actually doesn't attach PII to financial data in a banking situation, well, guess what? At that point in time, everybody's still doing that is actually doing something that's unconstitutional. So what I mean by that, that is the legal definition of illegal search and seizure, right? If you're still requiring that at that point in time, if and when there's an alternative.
It's kind of interesting. Like you basically like, if that becomes possible, then like everyone have to change at once. Is that what you're
Exactly? Yes, exactly. So people always, a lot of times people look back to the law and try to comply with the law. But the example for that I always make is, you probably have heard this at some point in time, when the car was first invented, right? Illinois, I think it was, passed a law that had a person walking with red flags in front of the car, right? Because people need to be warned that the car was approaching. So the point here being, as technology is driving changes in the law more often than the other way around. And this is our one shot to make this possible here. And so the metaphor I try to keep everybody to embrace is, if you look at your wallet, then your assets, quote unquote, in there are actually not the most important thing. And you guys realize that, right? So it's not the printed Federal Reserve note, it's not your credit card, it's your driver's license that's most important to you and most relevant to you, because if you lose that, it doesn't matter how much money you have, they won't let you on the plane, as one example. But the larger point there is, you also have to realize that you need to create the exact same thing on the technology level. By exact same thing, I mean the identity part needs to be a digital bearer instrument. Because, I mean, as I keep telling people, the number of cryptocurrencies we need is somewhere between 0 and 1. Right? It's a key lock system, and you are the important part, right? The individual is the important part, not the asset. The asset will amend to whatever the identity slots are. Right? So it's all the cart before the horse. I'm involved in most of the relevant CBDC discussions. It's all the cart before the horse, right? Mm-hmm. All not addressing the identity, what I call slots. Maybe you guys can tell me a more useful term for that. I call it slots, and like relating to like in-game characters, right? So you need to create a slot for a CBDC, right? So you can associate that if and when you need it to a real person, right? Anyway, I hope that is not entirely esoteric to you guys and provides some value.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think, you know, whenever we talk about this, it's always sort of the same, like when there are these things, you know, we're happy to sort of help drive the adoption of the standard in the same way that we're doing with things like Cape 10 links, where there was no standard way to represent an on-chain account ID across different blockchain networks and stuff. And so, you know, we help, like someone else bootstrap that effort, but we sort of help drive adoption of it, and we use it throughout the entire Ceramic code base. So I think it's something similar where, you know, it's hard for us to dedicate the bandwidth to do it, but if there are widely adopted standards, or there are standards that seem logical and serve real needs, then we're happy to, like, you know, build them in and use the proper language.
Yeah, that's why. So my effort is to translate the nonsense XML that we created at some point in time with Travel, but it has all these kind of, let's call them Oracle functions already that look for the prerequisites you need to then for that information to pass muster in the context of travel, so leaving the country, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all obviously exactly the same, but when everything else are in the realm of quote unquote identity. Right? So you need these kind of Oracle functions. I mean, in the context of travel, if there's one letter off in your passport, not being compatible with what's on your ticket, they simply don't let you on the plane. So it's somewhat of a higher standard even than what we understand as this metaphor of KYC today in the potential.
Yep.
Way more complex.
I think we're running up on time. So I think thanks everyone for coming in, sharing. It was an awesome call, I think we haven't had one since middle of January. So definitely a lot of progress on a bunch of fronts. And I think probably by the time we have this next call, I'm crossing my fingers that we might have a version of Ceramic out if this is 6 weeks from now. So it'll be right around that time. And hopefully by then we'll have a lot to report from some of the things and projects we heard from today. If you need any help, or as always, just pop in into Discord, and we're happy to help think through like what some of these integrations might look like as we're gearing up for launch.
Good, thanks.
Cool.
All right.
See you
Thanks
later.
everyone for joining.
Thanks all.
Thanks all.